Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very, very warm welcome to my show this evening, Spiritual Times with me, Philip Solomon. But I always try to look into something for you a little different. What I really love is when I get, questions. You send things that you would like me to talk about and ask me to look into it. And I suppose this week it sort of fits in with that to some extent. People will often say to me, "I'm religious, Philip, but I'm not that spiritual." Or more often the other way, "Oh, Philip, I'm very spiritual, but not religious at all. What's the difference?" Well, it's a very challenging question, but I was looking at some of my notes of classes that I've taken over the years, and I think this is what I've tended to generally say, and I hope it's a satisfactory for you as it was for the students that was giving the lecture or the talk to. It's one of those oft asked questions, isn't it? What's the difference between being religious and spiritual? And I suppose I have often fallen into the making the same quote myself. But I would like to think I am a spiritual person. But as a spiritualist, obviously, I follow that particular religion. But I wouldn't describe myself as deeply religious. And one or two people might be quite surprised about that, really, because I am a Reverend Minister in the Christian Spiritualist Society. Oh, I think it's one that's very difficult to really tie down. What can you say? I think that to be spiritual, you need to have a care and a wish to help others, but also accept that you are more than just a solid living being or body, rather a spirit with an infinite, never ending potential. Sounds rather like a spiritualist, don't I? Or at least the way one should be. I'm not really saying that you've got to be, but I think the one you would have to be. I think if you call yourself a spiritualist, you have to live a good life and follow certain rules. I think you can differentiate between religion and spirituality, though, because I believe most religions require you to follow a set pattern of rules. They have a belief in a system, pathway, or lifestyle that is set in the beliefs of those who have gone before and who have then made their mark on you and perhaps that specific religion that you're involved in. Whereas inner spirituality tends to be, well, I think it's when you think about things on a deeper level within you and sometimes stimulate your intelligence, unconsciously, even consciously or unconsciously. And it is what I believe helps you to be a good person, not just for others, but within yourself too, and removes blocks to moving forward in your life and success without the threat of failure. Success rewards punishment relevant sometimes to what you do or where you have been and things that you have acted upon and done in your life. They're all there, aren't they? All religions, I think, teach fear and reprehension, and that whatever your actions, unless you live within that religion's rules and set down practices, that might be there for you when you leave this mortal plane behind, will not be so pleasant. You have to remind, I suppose, we all know the stories of the pearly gates and St. Peter waiting there with his big lock and key to let the good boys in and the good girls and the others send them on a trip to somewhere else. Now, I'm being a bit flippant there, and I shouldn't be. All religions, I think, do teach that now, a bit of reprehension and fear of expressing yourself in a way that people, particularly in various deep religions, would say that you have to be. Spirituality, I think, teaches us to simply love and be loved and to put all our energy into doing what is right as far as you are concerned. You can't do too much about others, really. It's not that easy to change them, but that would be important for you, I think, making you much more likely to be sensible about what you do and don't do, and much more likely to learn from life's experiences personally rather than living under the threat of offending whatever you perceive to be God. I suppose I am saying that if decisions are made religiously and fixed in stone, that may be what you need to make progress. But if you might need to make decisions of the purest love and empowerment in this world, you're much more able to learn as you walk through life's pathways, I think. Spirituality also helps us to be unafraid to do what we feel is right from within and learn not to be fearful of the consequences, I suppose, that we might do for not living our lives the way that the religion that we were perhaps brought up in would suggest that we needed to. Yeah, I don't know. It's a difficult one, that really. Uh, I don't think you should be I think you should be unafraid to do what you feel is right from within, and learn not to be fearful of the consequences. That would be my advice, and I think that's a long way to being spiritual. Hmm. All of the major religions have codes that are set down that you need to be part of. Me as a spiritualist, we have our seven principles that, we guided to live our lives by. And I suppose me as a spiritualist, reverend minister, it would be my job to teach you to look at those seven principles and live by them. But I think spiritualism is a little bit different to most religions, whereas you can do a lot of things that you would want to do and not be that judged generally as you might be in more of the what we would call more orthodox religion. Now you've got to remember spiritualism has been around for a long while. I popped over to Darlaston Spiritualist Church last Sunday for the Harvest Festival. That was where my grandma in about 1925, 26 helped the founders to bring a spiritualist church to Darlaston. And in later life, my mother would be both the church medium and president. My dad used to work there as well, taking circles, and I think he used to look after the books for them, as they call it, and all that sort of stuff, which is an important role, isn't it, really? I think you need to find and live within a truth that is right for you and with real now, without limitations to getting more understanding and gaining everything we need to know just by studying and being guided by a book or the advice of someone, however much you look after them or look towards them for advice. You have to have that ability to live your life for spirituality to come growing without you, really. And again, I think for the spiritual person, the threat of purgatory, hell, punishment act is not an inherent fear. For as they walk their life in an effort to be good and in love and light, karma, which you sow, is what you will reap. That's what I think we all believe who have a basic religion. And bad things you do will come back and be there for you. And I think that's a good part of life. I really do. This is good, really, but the spiritual person, in my view, should also strive to walk their own pathway and write their own story, which should be one of understanding, self-discovery, enlightenment, and to come to the understanding that the only limits to what you can be, understand, and do in this world are the limits that you place upon yourself. And that applies to spirituality and religion just as much as anything else, really. If you want to really be seen as walking the walk in your religion, then you have to really live a life that's along those lines. I certainly, as a spiritualist, feel that, I have to try and do other kindnesses outside just my religion, which is spiritualism. Some of the great ones that have gone before us, such as prophets Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna, Jesus, and many others in their stories, written by their beloved followers, all walked and travelled great spiritual lives. But they also walked their own individual pathways as well, and set great examples that I'm sure prove to be understood and ultimately knowledge to learn for us who have followed on from them. Well, not followed on from them as prophets, but as looking into the life that they walked and trying to be as like that as we can. I think that would be fair to say. Right now, in our own times, we should be seeing a great need for understanding, I think, of other people in different parts of the world, different countries, you know. We all get angry sometimes when we think people are coming to our country and taking away our jobs or doing things that we could be doing. But you have to look a little bit deeper than that, really, because let's talk about good old England. To be honest, good old England, we all come from stock from overseas, don't we? You know, when I suppose when William the Conqueror uh, come and won the battle in 1066, we must have had a great deal of French influence coming into England henceforth, you know. And of course, I suppose if you look at it in other ways, William really would have been, most of the Normans were of Viking stock, you know. But then I'm going off track a little bit, aren't I, really? So is it better to be religious or to be a spiritual person? And is there a difference? That was the question that I was addressing. No one can really answer that for you in certainty, I don't think. No, it depends entirely upon your own contemplation of the self and the life you want to live. Lots of people say to me, "Oh, Philip, I'm not interested in religion, but I'm a very, very religious person." But almost always, when you get to know that person, you find that there is some sort of religious pathway that they do follow, you know. I even get people who say that, you know, they're spiritualists and they'll say, I'm very spiritual. That's the way I live my life. The very words, spiritualism, spirituality, it's a very similar word, isn't it, Philip? It is, but it's still a religion. It's still a religion. And I think really people in spiritualism have worked very, very hard to get recognition of that status. It wasn't so very long ago. Days of my grandmother and my mum as a little girl, they had to conduct their services in houses and terrified of the policeman's knock at the door to arrest them. And you probably all saw the story about Ellen Duncan that was on TV fairly recently. You know, I'm not going to go into that because it's not really addressing the question. But is spirituality the same as religion? I think it may well be to some extent, because I think if you're walking a spiritual life, you're looking really to what the Moors of the great ones have suggested we should live life from in the past, whether that be Buddha or Jesus or whatever, you know. You always find that religious people, I've met some very religious people who definitely ain't spiritual, if I'm honest about it. They might go along to church every Sunday and put on their best clothes and run for those few pews that I think belong to them at the front of the church. And expect the vicar to be very much looking to them and addressing them. Now I'm being a bit naughty there really. I shouldn't say that really, but I think you take my point. Whereas if you're a spiritual person, a lot of people who say that they're just spiritual don't attend church at all, really. Ever, they'd sooner go into walk in a forest or be close to the ocean and do tune into their own inner spirituality. So it's an odd question, isn't it, really? I'll never sort of move away from looking into answering things that people ask me. But I do think that is quite a difficult one to sort of come sort of divide it completely. I don't think that's probably possible because I think as I say, I think people who follow spiritual pathways, spiritual lives, and like to be looking after people, at one with nature, being very kind to other people, often very interested in healing. Sounds a little bit like the work that we were told that Jesus did, isn't it? You know what I'm saying, don't you? I think they cross over, and I think really it's very much a personal view. I'm not ducking that question. Religious or spiritual, what's the difference? I don't think there is a great difference, but I've gone over the different things that you might like to consider and think of in that context. I don't know. I would think, can you be deeply religious if you don't walk a spiritual pathway? in life? I don't think you can. Anyway, that's my view on that, and it's this week's topic. No doubt a lot of you will be sending me your opinions on that, and I'm glad that you do, because it's always great to have your opinions, you know. And I have many, many dear friends, many dear friends who will say, Philip, I live a spiritual life, but I'm not interested in religion, and I don't want to discuss it. And if that's how they feel, they're finding their pathway forward, aren't they? But I think you might be losing out a little bit by not accepting that whatever those great prophets did in this world, to be remembered thousands of hundreds of well, not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of years later, there must have been some good things that they presented that were great change and worthwhile, being spiritual. I do think I would have to say that most people who were really religious would also be spiritual as well. So that's sort of ducking this one a little bit. But it's a question you've asked me, many of you, and that's what we try to do on the Spiritual Times with me, Philip Solomon, every Thursday, and maybe that one will give you a little food for thought. And as I say, maybe you'll think about it and think what your direction would be, spiritual or religion. Maybe you've come to my opinion that they run in parallel lines. I don't know. I'd be very interested to hear from you anyway. And be good, as I always say. If you can't be good, be very careful. Think of karma. Karma's a fact. You do bad things, it will come back to you. I do believe that to be factual. And if you do things to be nasty to other people, even nasty, or look down on them, or don't treat them with respect, then one day you will find that that will come back to you. But that's karma, and maybe that's something I'll talk to you about another week. So in the meantime, I say good night and God bless. Always be good, but if you can't always be good, do be careful. Good night and God bless, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me. Very good to have you with me. Wouldn't be the same without you. I mean that. I was used to say that on my radio show for 13 years, and I'm sure some people used to think, oh, it's a funny way to tell you show up. But I think it is a good way, really, and I hope you'll accept that.